Welcome to Big Blend Radio's Art Show, featuring Victoria Chick, a contemporary figurative artist and early 19th and 20th century print collector. Welcome, everyone. Today, Victoria is telling us all about the history of national park posters. Nancy and I travel full-time documenting parks and public lands, public art, anything to do what the public can enjoy. And, well, that sounds good, doesn't it, Victoria? But national park posters is really kind of, I almost want to say it's like pop art. It's part of pop culture. And, when we travel to national parks, you get those maps. And when you go in, and I don't think they'll ever do away with them. And all those maps, when you go in, those little brochure maps, has art in them. When you go inside a national park, even the museums, the visitor centers, has some form of art. And a lot of us actually, save these park pamphlets as you go in. It has the map. It has like the main facts you want to know. And I know it's just fun. And a lot of people, I know people that have made coffee tables out of them, not actually the wood part of it or anything, but like the top, they've laid it out and they collect those. But then the other part is the national park posters. And I think they were here one day and then they were gone and now they're back and all different, right? So welcome back, Victoria. How are you?
Oh, thank you, Lisa. I'm glad to be talking to you once again.
Yeah. We're going to be doing a lot of parks.
Yeah. Once a month is almost not enough to cover everything we wind up covering.
I know.
All the rabbit trails and the main topics.
We love the rabbit holes and we do that and we do that well. But we've been talking a lot about parks and the arts and I'm excited about that. And in fact, as this airs, we're about to hit fall season and a lot of people are going to parks. National Public Lands Day, Parks and Public Lands Day is September 28th. So this is in good timing. And I also think we're heading into that fall season where we start looking at holiday shopping. And I think if you can get park posters for people who love national parks, that would be a really cool gift, wouldn't you say, for people that avidly travel?
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. The old park posters, they came up with some wonderful designs during the 1930s and 40s with Art Deco style. And they are reproducing those now. When they were first reproducing them, the man who was mostly responsible for all that, he had been a park ranger. And his name was Doug Lean, Len. And, but he had only seen them in black and white and he didn't know what the colors were. So the very first ones he produced, he did in color, but he didn't know what the original colors were. So that was kind of interesting. And then sometime later, after he had been reproducing them, he did see the originals. And so he changed the colors to match the originals. And, so either way, they were beautiful, beautiful posters. And anybody who likes Art Deco would really, really respond to getting a gift of a national park poster. He did them for a number.
I was just interested in the style of this, because of being Art Deco and, there's a resurgence of its modernism, right? And especially in the Southwest, like Palm Springs, Tucson has it. There's certain cities. I mean, even Asheville, North Carolina, home to Smoky Mountains National Park and the Blue Ridge Parkway. You go there, you'll have brick and then all of a sudden these, well-preserved Art Deco buildings. And it's like, wow. And then you go around the corner and, you've got cabins and things going off in the woods. So it's pretty interesting about this Art Deco. And I feel like there's a resurgence of interest, not just in the architecture of it, but also the art. And it's interesting to me because they managed to give the feel and the vibes of it. Like I'm looking at Yellowstone National Park one, but they keep it so simplistic. Even the fonts, I'm actually all into the fonts of these posters, and I try to match them on certain things when I do art for the podcast and stuff. So the fonts even are part of it to me. So is that just because it was in that era and that's what people were looking at? Because I even think of the park signs as we go in. There's certain the way the signs are done, like the old school, like welcome to, Grand Canyon,
Right.
this old school sign.
Yeah, it's all kind of rounded and gentle, kind of design, and curvy, streamlined. And you mentioned funk, did you? I think that's what I heard. And that actually what came later. It was like a semi resurgence, but it wasn't really Art Deco. But it was influenced by Art Deco. And one of the things when you mentioned about trains is that one of the very famous train designers, his name was Raymond Loewy, and Lowey.
Oh, yeah.
And
That's right.
yeah, and he designed trains, and he did them in kind of a very streamlined style. And so they went very well with the Art Deco style of art in general.
We had to go to trains, didn't we? It's a rabbit hole of another conversation. Stay tuned for that, everyone.
A rabbit trail already, and we're only about 5 minutes into our discussion.
Well, the train show is coming later, everyone. Stay tuned for that. In fact, let me just tell everybody that will be on October 29th. Stay tuned for that. We have a special show on that. So now we know who Victoria will be talking about on that podcast. But to me, that style is so interesting because there's this movement still. There's one that's wildlife. They have one with a deer, and just the movement of the trees and the deer as they keep it simplistic, but you still have this natural feel. So they used color a lot, and just like those rounded feels like you were talking about.
Right. One of the things I thought was interesting when I researched this is I talked about Mr. Lean, who had been responsible. He did posters originally for about 14 national parks, and national parks actually at the time did not know he was doing these. It was like his own business, but he was selling his posters to particular national parks, and he would feature those parks in the design. Well, also probably just a little earlier than he was working, there were posters put out, and we're going back to trains again. I'm sorry to say, but there was a man named Fred Harvey. Okay,
that's
Fred
right.
Harvey he was started out in Topeka, Kansas, and he was like the hospitality along the railway route. He had hotels. He provided the dining cars on the trains, and the service was like 4-star service at the time he was in business doing that. And he posters were part of his advertising for people to take trains, because it was train travel was elegant at the time, and people dressed up to go on a train, and they were served very, very elegantly. So he did 2 hotels that are really still famous. One is La Fonda in Santa Fe, and the other one is the hotel at the Grand Canyon. So he really pushed those 2 areas in the public mind as being really fabulous places, because for people on the East Coast, going to Santa Fe, and it almost still is, even for people in southern New Mexico like me, going to Santa Fe is like going to another country. It's so. I mean, it deserves its reputation, and the people call it the city different, and it is. It's it's a very, very fun place to visit. So anyway, Fred Harvey did lots of posters depicting the Southwest, and a lot of people got their whole idea of what the Southwest might be like from his posters.
Because it's imagery, and you've also got to think about where we were art-wise, where we were photography-wise at that time, and when I encourage people to go, the Petrified Forest, Petrified National Park, the Painted Forest, the Petrified National Park, is out in northern Arizona. If you can get in there, it's a scenic drive. If you don't manage to stay overnight, you can do the Quickie tour, which is do more than the quickie tour if you can. But if that's all you can do on a road trip, I mean, it's amazing. You can see one of those hotels and you can see the view. I mean, it is incredible the view you get. I remember actually having a business meeting from this view, and I sent them, I'm like, and they had a Wi-Fi out there because you're at the entrance of the park. And I'm like, here's where we're having our meeting from. And they're like, what kind of life do you and Nancy lead? I'm like, national park life. It's pretty darn cool. But it was amazing to see, go there and learn more about that. Santa Fe definitely has the Harvey House. And I encourage people to go to the La Posada, when you go there. In fact, it's said to be the very first hotel in the country at the La Posada, and it's on the Santa Fe National Historical Trail. So a lot of firsts there, and they have some incredible art. So if you love art, that hotel, you can actually go on even if you're not staying in the hotel. I mean, each room has hand done art. Even the beds have hand painted, work on them. I mean, Nancy and I got staying there for a couple nights, and all I can say is I can move in anytime. But
yeah, I'm sorry, because when I said La Fonda, I was thinking La Posada, and I'm really sorry. But they're both great hotels.
No, you're right. La Fonda. It is La Fonda. It is La Fonda. Did I say La Posada? Okay. There's a La Posada too, and that's haunted. La Posada is haunted. La Fonda is the first hotel, and I got it twirled around. But La Fonda, La Fonda is the original one, and it is tied into so much history. Fans who watched Oppenheimer, it's all tied in there. Well, with Los Alamos, La Posada is a very historic hotel just around the corner, and it is known for being haunted, and also has a lot of art. But La Fonda is the one you can take the art tour, and you can walk around the corner from the La Fonda and go to the Capitol building, and you will see amazing New Mexico art. It's like that collection of art is just jaw-dropping. But so Santa Fe has a lot, petrified forest, see, now I'm getting everything twirled right. The painted forest, Petrified Forest National Park is the right name. I always get that twirled around, but go there. And then if you are on that same kind of road trip in the Southwest, go to the Mojave National Preserve. And there you can go to the Kelso Depot. See, But that's also where there was a Harvey House out that way. Now there's a train depot, and they have a cool jail that they used to put all the prisoners in coming in on trains. And could you imagine staying out in the desert in a cell? You're outside the building in the depot if you were a prisoner. So scorpions and snakes and whatever could go, ooh, fresh meat. But anyway, going back to these park posters, you're right. I mean, you got that, like, it was like the Wild West out there. It's like, these are foreign lands in a way for especially people living back east,
Yeah, I think they consider they have to be exotic places, and that was really one of the reasons that a lot of the artists came to Santa Fe and to Taos back in the late 1800s. Is that they'd heard about this place because it's people describe it. If you've never seen it, it boggles your mind by just listening to what people describe it as looking like. But they were enough people. They came from Europe. They came from the East Coast. They even came from the West Coast, because when they went to the West Coast, they never came through this area. They took a ship around South America to get to the San Francisco and the whole West Coast. So when they heard about what lies between the East Coast and the West Coast, they were intrigued. Definitely. And so people gradually started arriving, and the train was great because it beat the stagecoach certainly in comfort and elegance.
And so they get there now, everyone, again. We have a whole train series coming up. So that's October 29th. But going back to the posters too, I mean, this is, art and travel have always been united. And I think this is going into even how tourism brochures were done back in that day. When you think about Route 66 and, we are doing the project on the Jefferson Highway that goes from Winnipeg to New Orleans. I mean, you see these old newsletters and magazines and tourism brochures, I think it's very tied to even the way postcards were done. Don't you think that was all kind of connected in that kind of style of art from, hey, we're going to start traveling because road tripping, that
Yeah.
was that era of the 40s, really.
Well, except for the war, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
that ruined
Before
everything.
before the war, the war kind of ended that for a while, but people picked it up before. I think it really started in the late 20s, really, and into the 30s when it was really super popular to travel by rail.
Mm.
And I mean, cars were okay, but they're not cars that weren't as good as the cars of today in terms of, well, for one thing, there's no air conditioning in the cars back then.
Mm.
So crossing the desert was a riskier business.
Mm-hmm.
So the train, made it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing about the posters, the way they were mostly designed and made was through the silk screen process, and that is a process where you forcing ink through a fine mesh onto paper, and the simpler the shape, the better. So this Art Deco style lent itself to using the method of silk screen printing. And so you don't see a lot of detail, but you see shapes, and it's really neat how the artist designed something so that they could get across their idea of landscape, for instance, without a lot of detail, just the shape of the buildings or the shape. And of course, the architecture was different here than it was
Mm-hmm.
anywhere else in the United States. So it captured people's imaginations.
It's cool, man. When you think of it, just how it's like, ooh. And I wonder, but photography is an art too. And Robert Decker, he does art posters as a photographer. And he's been on our show and
Uh-huh.
he does photography, but still puts it into a poster in the style of the old original National Park posters. Because at
Well,
one
that's neat.
point they
Yeah,
went away. They went away. And so he's like,
right.
well, I can do it this way. And yeah, he's pretty yeah, it is Robert Decker and everyone. I'll put a link to his interview with us on the podcast because I mean, when you see what he's done, he takes his
Right.
photography and really morphs it into that old style. And it's pretty amazing how he's managed to do it through photography. But he does take all the little fine points out of the photo, right? And
Hmm.
makes it into it's really cool. And he does donate, 10% of his annual profits to programs that support our national park system, which I think is pretty cool. So everyone, I'll put a
Very
link to
cool.
that in the episode notes as well as Victoria's article talking about all of this. But yeah, we interviewed him way back when,
Oh,
2018. Yeah.
well,
But
that's neat.
again, he got that font. There's a font. There's a national park poster font that I'm like, wow, I think it's Sunborn. I'm not sure. But yeah, I mean that whole so this goes into the world of production, art production, right?
Right.
And mass production through silk screening, but illustration. And that's what I think this kind of makes me feel like it really does tie into tourism. And obviously it does, right? But it is like an
Well, yeah.
illustration process that was different than something that you're going to put on your walls. And that's, it lends itself to being functional art as well because of it gets people to places. And then it is
Right.
also a way because when you think about way back when, how many people had cameras in the parks? Like now people are doing their selfies everywhere and doing stupid
Yeah.
things with their
Well,
selfies
yeah.
too.
I mean,
But
I'm sure everybody back then had a camera, but it wasn't instant gratification like it is now, where you can see what you get.
mhm,
But I mean, they had whatever kind of camera they had, black and white film camera, and some of them were really skilled and some of them weren't. but
Wasn't that when
but
people
but
had a Brownie? Would that be like the Brownie camera at that time, or
well, yeah,
no?
in the 1950s, that's what kids had. The kids had a Brownie camera in the 1950s because they were learning how to do photography. But people, I mean, there were Hasselblads and Leicas and stuff back then, and people who did try to do photography like Ansel Adams did with plates. But I mean, that's very awkward. I mean, we're very lucky to be able to get fabulous images on the cameras that are available to us now, even on our telephones
Yeah.
or iPhones or whatever. So we're lucky. But the thing is, what the posters provided information, so they had a function beyond art, but they were so good, they were so well designed, and so the colors were all harmonious, and even if there was information on them, it was part of the design, and they became valued by people who liked art as art. I mean, beyond the information part of it, you know. So it's kind of like there was a segue in between just, you know, information to get people to do something like travel, and what the value of what that art produced, became to be more than as it was ever anticipated at the beginning. You know,
And I agree. Yeah.
People may collect it because it's a style, you know, and they trying to duplicate the style in their home because they like the style, and that's all right. But
I think they did it for memories.
People.
Yeah.
It sets a tone. It has a mood to it that people appreciate it, and they like looking at it. You know.
Yeah. But to me, it's when you've gone to a park and maybe, you know, this is full color, these prints, these posters.
Right.
So it's a memory. That's where the souvenir comes in, you know, to me.
Right.
I think that a lot of people, that's what I was saying about, like, we can come home from a park and a lot of us will end up with 1,000 pictures from one day or 2 days, depending on how you photograph and who you are. You come back with all these memories, you come back with videos, you share them with friends. I mean, things have really changed. But at the same time as we have this digital, you know, ability to, you know, really capture all these moments, I'm also seeing this rise of popularity of things from that era, of people buying posters now because they're like, while we're getting all digital, we're also getting nostalgic. And it's the same thing that's happening with music, with people buying vinyl albums. And then now cassettes are coming back, Victoria. I don't know how far they'll go with it, but this is more of the limited edition nostalgia piece, right? And so I feel like these posters are kind of like people want to have part of this, because the American National Park System is part of America's history. We are the first people to start a national park service, right? And the rest of the world copied that, and that's great. And now we have UNESCO World Heritage Sites and things like that. And, you know, parks communicate with each other on conservation and management programs, how to preserve and protect historic sites. So I think, you know, we want to have some of that nostalgia. If you are a park lover, you want it all. Like, you know, you start, you know, when you're a collector, you know about collecting. You know, once you start, it's like, you know, I must have it. And so I wonder what it's
I can't
like.
stop.
I know there's people doing new things like Rob Decker, but then there's, you know, others. I mean, because at one point they almost became obsolete, these posters, you know? So, having them back out there, I think, is a really good thing, you know, so people can enjoy it. And I think it really came when the centennial for the park system, right, in 2016, that was kind of a highlight to get them back out there.
That other guy I was talking about, that Doug Lean, he had originally done 14, and then he got carried away like we do, and
Mm.
he had a goal to do all the parks, just like. And I thought when I read about him, I thought of you guys doing your traveling because his goal was to have a poster for every park by 2016 for the centennial of the park national park
Wow.
service. So I don't know if he made it with that, but I'm sure he made it. You know, sure he
That's
eventually
somewhere.
did. Yeah.
Yeah.
So and the fellow you mentioned, the photographer. I mean, that whereas Lee is still trying to do it the old-fashioned way. Your guy has new technology that he's using, and so that's exciting. So you've got different approaches to the parks, to appreciating the parks and having something to bring home to, as you say,
Yeah.
be part of your memory.
Yeah, your memory and your history. And I think it is interesting actually how you go, here's someone trying to recreate the old and here's the new. And at the same time, it's carrying the torch. I mean, that happens
Yes.
in art and music. And I mean, right now people are still arguing about should we put three spaces before the first sentence in a paragraph? I mean, actually it is easier for our eyes, everyone. As we get older, it helps. I'm just saying, I went all into the new modern way of taking it out. And now now I'm over the hill. I start to go, you know what? I kind of like that three space, rule. Can we bring it back? And it's interesting because you think these things flop and change, but I think history, when history repeats itself, it's a beautiful thing, especially in art. And it's also that, these posters were capturing the parks back in the beginning. And now, when we go in to see how the parks are preserved, those, there's going to be a little change because of climate change, right? And things like that. But our parks are of the highest standards of protecting and preserving them, the highest standards in the world. And that's the same around the world as best they can. I can't speak on every country. But that is supposed to be the highest of the highest of the highest of protections. And so a lot of times you'll things do die and come and go just because nature is like that. But we had friends who, made a home movie in the mid-70s of Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Parks. They used to go there all the time. They made this home movie. And when we started our tour, they put them all on a disc for us to see. And one of our first parks that we documented on the park tour, which was the Spirit of America tour years ago, back in 2012, actually, when I think back to it, we watched their movie and could compare it to the photos we took. And yes, there's a few things like, oh, that tree may not be there, but this one is, it was almost identical in preservation. Yeah. That's how good they are. I mean, now, of course, those two parks have gone through a ton of fires, but still, like, they keep things like the Lodgepole Visitor Center. And, there's just certain iconic things that, and if they can't, they try to maintain it back to what it was. Like those welcome signs and those, I know towns that want those, welcome. It's like a banner. Silver City, you guys have one of those. Right. As you go into Silver City, New Mexico, we do the big welcome signs. And that was a thing that was done way back when. How many towns do you go into that have that? It became a little side token on the side of the road. Here's your little poster, not a poster, like a little plaque, welcome. Right. But it used to be, you've entered the town and it was like grand, not like fancy, but just this, I don't know, a welcome banner.
It's a welcome, and welcome's important. So I wish every town had the gumption to put up a welcome sign.
Yeah.
When you go into town, just that first little impression makes you more likely to stop and buy something, stop and spend some time, look around. Yeah, it's smart. It's smart and it's gracious. I think it's very gracious. We can
Yeah.
all do more, do with more graciousness.
Well, I think I'm not going to knock the things on the side. You know what I mean? Like the welcome
Yeah.
signs. Like we went to Santa Claus. Was it Santa Claus or Christmas, Indiana? Christmas, Indiana.
Hmm.
And they have a
Yeah.
Santa Claus an actual big fat Santa, happy Santa with his big belly. They made it sure it was, I'm not knocking anything. I'm just saying that's what it was. And he was a happy Santa. And, he's fat and jolly. That's how he's always been represented. So it's how I'm saying it. So, anyway, and he's throughout town and what you found, you felt welcome. You felt, immediately safer. That's a weird thing to say, but it's true
Yeah.
because there's town pride, community pride is what I should say, where
Yeah.
it's like when Nancy always says, when you go into a town, you see a mural or public art, which we all love here. Nancy and I, that's a passion thing. It's a rabbit hole that's never ending. But she always says when you see flower baskets, that's usually the first sign of a town going, okay, we're a lot of times revitalization, but it's beautifying a town because it means, oh, you're going to have to care for these flowers and plants, and when you
Yes.
have towns that put the banners up for their holidays and you suddenly feel like you entered a community where everybody cares. Now, when you go into a
Yes.
community that doesn't have that, you're like, what's going on? Like, should I stop? Do people care? Like, there's just a different, you feel a sense of community. It's pride is almost the
Right.
wrong word. If you feel like this town is happy, they're working together to make it thrive. And I think that's the same thing. It's like these posters, this art, is all part of it. So yeah. That's cool. We went on a big rabbit hole, didn't we?
We did.
Oh well. That's it.
That's all right. Yeah.
But that's what art does. Art is supposed to inspire you to think beyond everything, So everyone, we've got the article up in the episode notes. I'm also going to link that one for the photographer Robert Decker. I think that's a interesting contrast to see how they were done. But in closing, Victoria, what I do want to say is, even though they had this Art Deco style, right, in these posters, you could see artists go, I'm changing the font. I'm going to do it a little bit this way, but they didn't go too far off the scale. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So someone had to have said, like, don't go crazy. You know what I mean? This is kind of what we want. I think there was some kind of freedom, but not, or maybe it was just done in different eras. I don't know, but I see that it's still the general style. Like you could love a band, like a blues band,
right,
and then all of a sudden they add a little country to the blues,
Yeah. Well, I think as we move along in life, okay, there'll be a style, and then there'll be some quirk that happens. Something happens in life in general, and that causes things to change. It causes our attitudes to change a little bit, and we may not adopt something new exactly, but we're influenced by something new. And so I think artists tend to pick up these emanations, I'll call them, from the period that they live in. So if something gains popularity in the 20s, by the time 1940 comes around, they might tweak it a little bit. And I think that's what you're talking about with the fonts. Mm-hmm. The first ones were very, very streamlined. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when you streamline something, it may be harder to read. You may have to study a little bit to get the meaning of it. So I think they simplified it a bit as time went on.
See, that makes sense. They simplify, and then later they go, wait, we want to go back to the old way.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
Isn't that wild?
We're never satisfied. We are never satisfied. Truly.
That's right. And that's the thing with artists too. So how is that? I mean, I wonder about that with, here's posters getting mass produced, right? You could do a painting and it goes into someone's house. The original is there, but now your mass production, right? Posters is a little bit different than, you know, the prints, the limited edition prints and everything we've talked about with you over the years. But a poster is like, we're going out to town. And if the artist was like, well, I didn't quite get it to do it the way I wanted to do it, or wasn't quite, you know, because, you know, that's always a battle, right? Of knowing when something is done.
Yeah.
And then it goes out in mass quantities. That's fun, isn't it?
Well, it does. And it probably satisfies most people, you know, because I mean, it's art, and especially that kind of art, they're trying to communicate an idea, and they're trying to make you feel a certain way, favorably toward whatever product they're selling. In this case, they're selling the West. They're selling the Southwest, or they're selling the Blue Ridge Mountains, whatever park is being pictured in there. So I mean, it's people respond to it. I mean, so
all of it has it's really just giving you this feeling.
Yes,
it's like a sense of place. That's what I get from these posters. It's a sense of place,
and you get the feeling. I mean, the posters do a great job of condensing what most people would feel when they come to the Southwest and see giant stone monuments. I mean, when I mean monuments, I mean natural rocks of monumental size, sticking straight out of the ground, a flat ground, or you see an arch that's so magnificent, you can see the sky underneath it. I mean, you see things here that are like nothing you've ever seen before, and I always get a sense of awe when I see them. Even if I've seen them repeatedly, they're inspirational.
It gives a sense of place and perspective. That's what the other thing, because they take it to simplicity, right? I look at Zion National Park, this one, and it's like, man, that is a mountain that they're showing. It's like, you know, but sometimes it's because they've got down to the simplistics, you know, when they've got Old Faithful for Yellowstone, you're like, oh, I see. Like that really stands out. Like we're going to make this, you know, your
reaction is not going to be like Beavis and Butthead when you see it.
Yeah, right. And then just, I mean, the Grand Canyon one is pretty epic that we have a photo of. The image of, I mean, it's like, and it's so funny also to go back to the terminology, a free government service, Grand Canyon National Park, U.S. Department of the Interior National Park Service. It's like, hey, we're here. I mean, it's just so interesting to read how, I mean, they go for Lassen Volcanic National Park, which is incredible. It goes Ranger Naturalist Service Headquarters, Loomis Memorial at Manzanita Lake, lectures, hikes, motor caravans, campfire programs, information, season, late June to mid-September. Like they're doing it. That was an ad. You know, full on ad. It's a full page ad, you know, but it's a poster still, you know, it's like people collect posters from, you know, concerts and stuff. And then they put them on t-shirts and everything. It's memorabilia. That's what I was getting at. This is, you know, and if you can still get it in your home, and it's special. It's a special
thing. Know, you're right. You mentioned Lassen, and I went through Lassen National Park in August. One year, and in August of that year, the road through Lassen Park was about 1.5 lanes, and the sides were snowdrifts, and they went up probably 16 to 20 feet, and you were going down a hallway composed of snow, basically driving through, and there's no way to take a picture of that when you have your picture in your hand, that it expresses exactly how you felt or how it looked. And that's where I think something that's done as a poster is the size of in your mind. It translates better to what you've experienced going through there. So the posters, I mean, the posters are big by camera standards, and they really bring back the feeling of the experience that you had when you were there.
Mm-hmm. It's true. And even the verbiage, I mean, telling you there's campfire programs, field trips, nature walks, nature talks, it also shows that nothing has changed. The parks still do that, you know. You may have to make reservations these days, you know, because we're bigger in population. You know, but yeah, I think there's something where, and the artist had to get to that iconic point. What is in one picture? You can't put 20,000 things unless you're doing like a collage, right? What is this going to, what's the iconic wow factor that gives you the sense of place and gives you that feeling, you know? And then at the same time, if you've been there, you go, yeah, that's my memorabilia thing. And maybe my photo's terrible or whatever, you know that you have this, you know, it's a piece of history now, even if it's new people going in and taking photos because of that style. It invokes like, yeah, I mean, these parks have been around for a long time. It invokes the spirit of travel, which started in the early 1900s. Thank you, Henry Ford. Then, of course, like you were talking about the train travel.
Yeah.
I mean, and the trains were a huge reason of why we have national parks. I mean, the artists in the parks were on trains. That's how they got to the parks in the beginning. And that's how they were able to take their art and showcase it to the people that needed to see it to make the parks happen. We wouldn't have the parks without the artists, you know?
No.
So, that's amazing when you think about it.
Well, yes, it is. And when you think about the artists, well, I mean, and photographers too were important at that time. But when they could bring the images to Congress, so that Congress could somewhat, even vicariously, experience what was there, that was an amazing thing that the Congress could understand visually what was at stake and why it had to be preserved and you know, form the National Parks Service. So I mean, I don't know if it could have happened. At least it could have happened, but not as soon as it happened.
Exactly,
here
it
in the
would
United
take 10
States.
years, and you wouldn't have the support of the people as much because if they're not there, like now, people have been to the national parks, and when something happens to like, hey, we're going to close the Grand Canyon. Oh, heck no, you're not. And it doesn't matter what political party, and that's been proven over and over. No matter what political party, people love their parks, and there are parks. We pay for them, and so we want to support them as best we can, keep them protected and preserved as much as we can. And so, you know, when something threatens a park, you're going to have to deal with the American public, you know. And back in the day, when it was first getting started, people were like, what do you mean a national park? What's that? I mean, in England, they were, I think, first called recreation spaces. And I think that was even, and then like Hot Springs National Park, which was actually the first piece of land set aside. So there's this argument about it being the first park before Yellowstone, but it was they called it a reservation, right? Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
So it's just the management history is interesting. I think a lot of us forget about that. And when we're in a park, we're like, oh, look at this amazing saguaro or Joshua tree or sequoia tree or buffalo, you know, bison, excuse me. Gosh, I can't get my names. Hotels, we got park names all twirled around, but that's because we got derailed on a train. But that's okay. But that's the thing, though. You know, when you're there, you're in awe. You really are, because these places are like, they put you in that. And when you go home, you can look at that one poster and all those memories will come back immediately. You can look at your photos too, obviously. But the posters just give you that iconic vibe. Yeah, I was there. I know what that felt like to stand by that waterfall, you know. So very cool. All right, everyone, of course, as always, go to victoriachick.com, and nationalparktraveling.com has these articles that Victoria has written. But I'm going to put the link in the episode notes for you to check out. But if you go to nationalparktraveling.com, just type in National Park Posters and you'll find her article as well as the interview we did with photographer Rob Decker. And I'll let him know that, hey, we've been talking about you. But anyway, thanks so much, Victoria. Always fun. We look forward to the next time.
Okay. Well, we will look forward to it too next month.
That's right. It'll come sooner than we think, right?
Okay. Thanks, Lee.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio. You can view Victoria Chick's artwork at victoriachick.com. Keep up with us at bigblendradio.com.